Hey guys, welcome back. So now hopping back into Silver Surfer Black, which in my opinion is like a testament to Marvel's commitment to telling not only a single story with a beginning, middle, and end, but instead really seizing the opportunity of going millions of years into the past and millions of years into the future and filling the void of many untold secrets and introducing new concepts to things that were left unexplained. And in my opinion, with this, they're doing a great job. And I mean like everywhere from the origin of Knull to War of Realms, Black Panther, House of X, Powers of 10, and the list goes on. But as far as their method with Donny Cates' Silver Surfer Black, it's taking a very unique approach that yet again shows us why these stories are working so well. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so in our recent talks about Silver Surfer Black, we got into the setup for this arc, which began with the new Guardians of the Galaxy and a number of characters being time displaced, which is something at the time that you could tell just as a comic book reader that with a number of heroes getting thrown into a black hole, like this has got to be a setup for something later down the line, whether it be some type of spin-off, which is usually what happens, but when that happens it's more so to the point of bolstering that specific event that the anomaly took place, like Infinity Wars for example, with the universe being folded in half and a number of the characters being merged together. Much of those spin-offs really just played into that narrative itself, just shining more light on the main event of Infinity Wars. But with Silver Surfer Black, Donny Cates, he's shown us one of the better forms of execution with rolling the aftermath that we had seen with the anomaly that had taken place with the new Guardians of the Galaxy and rolled it into the new series of the Silver Surfer, which is not like a spin-off or a tie-in, but using it to tell a whole new story, which at its core so far just feels like a good Silver Surfer series. And one of the best parts of this series, which is why it's one of my favorites right now, is the fact that it's placed Norrin Radd the Silver Surfer millions of years in the past, and with doing so it's allowed us to see not only the existing Marvel history unfold, but also doing this in a way where we see the new history, and more specifically the history with Knull, the god of the symbiotes, who we're recently finding out has been here this entire time. And the way that this is done, it just works very well. But so now, like we talked about, where we had seen the Silver Surfer encounter Knull, and at the time where he did, the Surfer was in very much a weakened state, and mostly from saving the heroes from being torn apart after being sucked into that black hole, and at the time the Surfer really being one of the only people who could withstand that and using that advantage to save everyone else. But with that leaving him in a weakened state, this left him vulnerable to the point to where he was almost taken over by Knull. But at this point in time with Knull, in relation to his history, he hasn't really met anyone quite like the Silver Surfer, and the closest comparison would probably be the Celestials when they first arrived, creating life and planets and essentially bringing light into what was previously Knull's kingdom of endless darkness. But with the Surfer barely getting away from Knull, and with doing so still having a piece of the symbiote which Knull attached to him still remaining on his left arm, soon after he ran into Ego, the living planet, who at this point in time is still a very young planet. And with us seeing him here, there's really no explanation so far to whether his original origin still remains intact or if that's changed at all, because back in the Mighty Thor issue number 228, at the time we got the origin of Ego, and I'm pretty sure at this time it was Jerry Conway and Joe Sennett, with Conway's writing and Sennett's elaborate illustrations. But at the time this gave us a flashback into the history of Ego, which I'm hoping stays the same, because if you think about it, it's very similar to the Silver Surfer, with both of them experiencing the tragic loss of their home planet and its people. But in the case of Ego, it's quite different. And like I mentioned, this is something that Thor discovered back in Mighty Thor issue 228 and really issue 227 and 228. And at the time when Thor, Hercules, and Firelord had teamed up with Galactus going up against Ego, they reached a point where Thor traveled to the center of Ego to where he saw within the mind of Ego his dark origin. Because for Ego, whose name was originally Egros, he was once a scientist who attempted to save the people of his home planet from being destroyed by a supernova, and with doing so hiding them within bunkers near the planet's core. And so now at the time this wasn't like your regular supernova, and the reason why was because this is something that occurred as an experiment from a guy known as the Stranger, who was potentially risking the lives of billions in an experiment. But with Ego attempting to save his people by hiding him in these bunkers, he didn't make it down to the bunker in time, and when he was caught in the blast of the supernova, he absorbed the lives of 2 billion men, women, and children. And for millions of years this has been like his guilt, his secret, and his living nightmare, with living portions of these inhabitants still existing within him to a degree. And in the ways that this is similar with the Silver Surfer, who isn't necessarily 100% innocent, his story is very similar, because originally when Galactus arrived on his home planet Zenn-La, he presented Galactus with a bargain to spare his home planet Zenla in exchange for his services as a herald to find Galactus other planets to feed on, which once again doesn't make him that innocent with that decision. But around this time that he meets Ego, he also continues to have these dreams or visions of life back on Zenla, very close to the time of the arrival of Galactus. But what's different within these visions is for him they end quite differently, because in the end, instead of Galactus arriving, it's himself, and he's the cause of destruction to his own people. And you can just imagine for him that is terrifying on a number of levels, because for one, he exists in this dream as his old self, as an inhabitant of Zenla who's terrified of its destruction, but at the same time he's also the harbinger of death and the cause of that destruction. And him doing this with himself being overtaken by the influence of Knull but not being able to stop it. And even in this dream, his original self, Norrin Radd, he attempts to make his plea and save his people, but the monster that the Silver Surfer's become, he doesn't speak, he doesn't bargain, he just arrives at Zenla and he does his job. And this vision or nightmare could very much be to the credit of that piece of the symbiote that is still attached to the Silver Surfer, which can definitely see into his mind and into his history, but also it's very possible that this is also a look deeper into Norrin Radd, who has the history after becoming the Silver Surfer of leading Galactus to different planets, which still had life on them, and over the ages he's witnessed the death of billions without batting an eye. But fast forward to now, we know that that's something that does bother Norrin, and it's very much a result of meeting different people throughout the ages, most notably the Fantastic Four, but that's a maturity that he's gained throughout the course of time. But while he's here speaking to Ego, he asks for permission to land on the surface, which Ego is pleased to hear because most people don't just ask to land on the surface, they just be landing there. But when the Surfer arrives, they begin to discuss a number of issues, one of the main issues being Knull, and the other being the symbiote that's attached to the Surfer that he just can't shake. But it's not too long into this conversation where an object crashes into Ego, making its way to his center, which causes Ego a tremendous amount of pain, because when this is happening, it appears to be killing him. And the Surfer, he immediately goes in to remove this threat, but when he does, he tells Ego, like, I'm not trying to take advantage of your pain, but you gotta let me know that you will help me when this is over to go against Knull, to which Ego agrees as the Silver Surfer continues. And so now at this point, a few things are happening, because one, with the Surfer digging beneath the layers of Ego, it's a little bit more difficult than it would be if he were at 100%, but even still with him being who he is, it's not like a big challenge for him. But at this point in time, with the Surfer being weakened with his travel all the way back here in history, he's also extremely weakened from all the dwarf stars that he made to fight off Knull. But he also admits that this object that's attached to him, it's causing rapid atomic degeneration, which is more or less causing him to be undone, giving his weakened state. But also with him doing this, it reminds me a lot of those old issues of Thor, when we had seen him travel through to the center of Ego, back when we discovered Ego's origin. But in Thor's case, if I remember correctly, I believe he had taken the route which Egros had created for his people to be hidden within the core, versus the Silver Surfer who's just burrowing through each layer. But for the Surfer, who, once again, this would have been a cakewalk for if he were at 100%, and granted for many others, they couldn't make it through 2 or 3 of these levels, especially with like your 5th layer being made of solid diamonds. But for the Silver Surfer, because he's so powerful due to his power cosmic, even in this weakened state, he admits that he just feels a little warm, which is still crazy because this is the guy who's used to like flying through suns. But with doing this on top of everything that's already fighting against the Surfer and causing him not to be at his peak performance, he also has to battle against Ego's immune system, which is also trying to save Ego's life. And he can't just kill them all off, because if he does, essentially that'll kill Ego as well. If not immediately, then sometime in the near future. But when he arrives here at Ego's core, he comes to find out that the object that crash landed on Ego and made its way here, it's actually a very familiar object, which opens up a whole nother can of worms in the middle of this huge conflict. Because when he gets here, he discovers that the object that crashed here was Lifebringer 1. And so now for anybody who's just new to comics or not sure what Lifebringer 1 is, this is the beginning of Galactus in the Marvel Universe as we know it, with Lifebringer 1 being like the incubator which allowed Galactus to evolve and survive after entering this universe. And prior to this point, the way that this was explained back in Ultimates issue 2 back in 2015, Galactus had been one of the sole survivors of his universe at that time who were dedicated to just preserving life, period. Because for them, if they were to perish, all life as they knew it would cease to exist. And in a way, this is a characteristic that has stuck with Galactus even throughout the years to this date. But back at the time when him and his crew had encountered a mega cosmic storm that was going to take them out, this is the event that essentially took out his entire crew and caused him to cross over into the Marvel Universe as we know it. And even at the time when this happened, he had mentioned that he could hear the universe calling him, telling him that he must survive. And when this took place and his ship and his crew were destroyed, this mega cosmic ray storm, it had also turned out to be his ticket into the Marvel Universe. and when he arrived, because of their advanced technology, his ship began to rebuild itself into Lifebringer 1, which protected and sustained him as a sole survivor, who would eons later come out, transformed and evolved as the Galactus that we were originally introduced to, which is completely crazy to see the Silver Surfer encounter at this point in time. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I really like the combination of Knull, Ego, the Silver Surfer, and Galactus within this narrative, because prior to this point I never really thought about how much they all have in common. But the crazy scenario at this point that the Surfer has with him needing to save Ego, and he can't kill Galactus because the universe needs Galactus. But it's very interesting to see how he's going to save both, keep them alive, and possibly he could get stuck with the decision to speed up the incubation of Galactus in order to get his help to defeat Knull. But let me know you guys' thoughts down in the comments, and let me know some of your theories, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.